The day started like any other in our quiet home. I was sitting by the window, watching the sunlight stretch lazily across the living room floor, when Mom mentioned that her friends were coming over in the afternoon. It wasn't unusual, her friends often dropped by, but something about today felt different. Maybe it was the way she smiled, a little too tightly, or the way she kept glancing at her phone, fingers trembling slightly as she typed and erased messages. Mom has always been the heart of our home, warm, welcoming, and full of laughter. I admired her strength and kindness, especially after Dad left years ago. She raised me alone, balancing work and home effortlessly, or so it seemed. Yet today, beneath her usual calm, I sensed an undercurrent I couldn't quite place. The house buzzed with activity as she prepared. The scent of fresh jasmine filled the air, and plates of snacks lined the kitchen counter, waiting for the arrival of guests. Mom hummed softly, but there was a tightness in her voice whenever she spoke on the phone, and a brief pause whenever I asked if she was okay. I shrugged off my concern, telling myself it was just nerves about the visit. Her friends had always been like a second family, loud, cheerful, and full of stories from their younger days. I knew most of them, though I never got too close. They would usually fill the house with their laughter and chatter, turning an ordinary afternoon into a celebration. But today, my excitement was mixed with an odd feeling I couldn't shake. As the clock ticked closer to their arrival, I found myself watching the front door more than usual. I wondered if I'd see anyone new, or someone I'd like, someone who might change everything. Secretly, I hoped for a spark of romance in my own life, something I hadn't dared to admit before. Mom seemed distracted, stealing glances toward the window herself, as if waiting for something or someone. Her fingers brushed nervously over a small pendant around her neck, a habit I'd never noticed until now. The house felt heavier with anticipation, the kind that wraps around your chest and won't let go. Then the doorbell rang. Mom straightened, took a deep breath, and smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I stepped back, watching as she opened the door to welcome her friends, laughter spilling out, voices blending in a familiar, warm melody. But behind that laughter, I caught a fleeting glance between Mom and someone I didn't recognize, a silent exchange charged with meaning I couldn't understand. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the calm before the storm. The day Mom's friends came over would change everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and family. And I never imagined how it would end. The door swung open, and the house instantly filled with a flood of voices and laughter. Mom's friends arrived one after another, familiar faces bright with warmth, wrapped in the easy camaraderie of years spent together. The room buzzed with energy, the kind that usually made me smile, but today it felt different. Among the group was Lena, one of Mom's oldest friends, graceful, with an effortless charm that seemed to light up the room. But it wasn't Lena who caught my attention. It was the man she had brought with her, a stranger to me, yet somehow familiar in the way they moved together. He was tall, with a quiet confidence and eyes that flickered with something unspoken whenever he glanced at Mom. At first, I tried to dismiss it. Maybe it was just my imagination. After all, adults could have friends and acquaintances I didn't understand. But the way Mom's smile faltered ever so slightly when she saw him, and the subtle tension between Lena and Mom, didn't go unnoticed. They greeted each other with a familiarity that went beyond simple friendship, soft touches on the arm, knowing glances exchanged like secret messages. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, a confusing mix of curiosity and unease. Who was this man, and why did his presence change the atmosphere so profoundly? The afternoon wore on, filled with stories and laughter that echoed through the rooms, but beneath the surface, a quiet undercurrent tugged at the edges of my awareness. Mom seemed distracted, her eyes darting toward the stranger more than once, and Lena's gaze followed every move with a sharpness that unsettled me. I found myself watching them from across the room, heart pounding, trying to piece together the silent conversation playing out in their eyes. Meanwhile, my own thoughts drifted to Min, the boy I'd admired from afar, whose smile always made my chest flutter. Today, he was unusually distant, absorbed in his phone and barely noticing my presence. The contrast stung. Here I was, caught in the swirl of adult secrets I didn't understand, while the boy I cared for seemed miles away. I felt invisible, tangled in a web of feelings I couldn't untangle. As the evening shadows lengthened, the air grew heavier with unspoken truths. Mom excused herself briefly, and I saw Lena and the stranger lean in close, their voices low and urgent. It was then I noticed the faint tremor in Mom's hands when she returned, an unspoken confession in the way she avoided my gaze. The night, once bright with laughter, now seemed charged with something fragile, a delicate balance that could shatter at any moment. And I knew, deep down, that this visit would leave marks far deeper than anyone could see. The day Mom's friends came over was no ordinary day. It was the beginning of a story I never thought I'd live through. And the end? I had no idea it would come so soon. Later that evening, after the laughter had faded and the house grew quiet, I found myself unable to sleep. Something kept pulling me from the edges of my thoughts, a feeling I couldn't shake. Curiosity won over caution, and I quietly followed the faint sounds drifting from the living room. Through the dim hallway light, I saw Mom and the stranger, his name I still didn't know, talking in hushed tones, close enough that their words were almost whispers. Their faces were serious, shadows crossing the space between them. I froze, heart pounding as I caught pieces of their conversation. They spoke not as friends, but as people entangled in something complicated and secret. The stranger's voice was low, almost pleading, while Mom's was tight, filled with hesitation and guilt. A sudden ache hit me. The trust one had in Mom, the person who had been my world, started to crumble in that instant. I realized then that the uneasy feeling I'd ignored all day was the truth whispering in silence. Memories flooded back, the secret phone calls, the stolen glances, the tremble in her hands. It all fit together now, like a puzzle I'd been too scared to complete. But it wasn't just Mom who betrayed the trust I'd held sacred. Lena was part of this, too. Their friendship, once so bright and familiar, now shadowed by secrets and unspoken betrayals. I retreated silently, feeling the weight of 1,000 questions crushing my chest. How long had this been going on? Why did no one tell me? And what about Min? Did he sense this too? Or was I the only one caught in the storm? The next morning was different. The house felt colder, the usual warmth replaced by a brittle silence. Mom avoided my eyes, and when I tried to speak, her answers were distant, rehearsed. The smile that once lit up our home was now just a mask hiding something deeper. I struggled to reconcile the woman I loved with the one who had hidden so much. My heart ached not only from betrayal but from the fear of losing her and the family we had built. Meanwhile, Min remained distant, his attention elsewhere. It was as if he sensed the change too, but didn't know how to reach me through the growing divide. I yearned to tell him everything but feared the consequences. In the midst of the silence, I was left alone with my thoughts, torn between love and anger, hope and despair. The story I had believed in was unraveling before my eyes, and I didn't know how to stop it. But one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. The day Mom's friends came over had begun with laughter, but now it stood as the day my world shattered. And the hardest part? The end still hadn't come. Days passed, each one heavier than the last. The silence between Mom and me felt like a vast canyon, filled with unspoken pain and shattered trust. I wanted answers, but the questions I asked only seemed to push her further away. The warmth we once shared had cooled into a cautious distance neither of us knew how to bridge. One afternoon, I found Mom sitting alone in the garden, the late sun casting long shadows across her face. Her eyes, usually so full of life, were tired and distant. Gathering courage, I sat beside her, the weight of everything pressing on my chest. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked quietly. Mom's breath caught, and for a moment, she seemed lost in memories. Then, with a voice trembling yet honest, she began to explain, not the details I had imagined, but the pain behind her choices, the loneliness she had hidden from me. "I never meant to hurt you," she said, tears glistening. "Sometimes people make mistakes, but love doesn't just disappear." Her words weren't perfect, and the wounds they couldn't erase. But in that fragile moment, I saw her, not just as my mother, but as a person struggling to find her way. I realized that love is complicated. It can falter and fracture, but it can also heal and grow stronger. Betrayal wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with honesty, forgiveness, and hard truths. As for Min, he quietly returned to my side, sensing the change without needing explanations. Together, we found small moments of joy, simple conversations, shared smiles, that reminded me life could still hold light, even after darkness. The friends who once seemed like strangers now felt like part of a complicated puzzle, pieces that didn't always fit but were essential to the bigger picture of who we were. I learned that sometimes the people we trust most are human, flawed, and fragile, and that accepting this is the first step toward healing. The day Mom's friends came over was more than just an ordinary visit. It was a turning point, a reminder that love is messy, unpredictable, and sometimes painful. But it's also resilient. And as I look back now, I understand that endings are not always final. They are doorways to new beginnings, to growth, and to hope. So, I choose to believe in the future. The one where trust can be rebuilt, where love can be reclaimed, and where family, no matter how broken, can find its way back to whole. Because sometimes the hardest stories are the ones worth telling.